listening to Insert AI Generated Title, a podcast about artificial intelligence and how it impacts our lives, produced by the California Center for Ethics and Policy, or CCEP, at Cal Poly Pomona. My name is Tiffany Ju. I'm an assistant professor of global ethics and technology at Old Dominion University, a faculty fellow with CCEP, and your host. In the spring of 2025, our student fellows explored the ethical and policy issues arising from the rapid development of AI, including privacy, fairness, and bias, as well as larger questions of truth and our very perception of reality. How can we use and design AI in responsible ways? When, if ever, should we trust it? In this season's episodes, students will draw from our seminar discussions and their own lived experiences to explore how AI is affecting education, creativity, scientific inquiry, and human relationships. In today's episode, AI in the Classroom, CCEP student fellows Rebecca Garcia-Marguez and Destiny Lorenz explore the implications of generative AI in the classroom setting. They highlight the experiences of both students and professors in understanding the challenges and opportunities that AI poses to learning and classroom pedagogy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast episode on Can Students and Professors Keep Up with ChatGPT? I'm your host, Destiny Lorenz.
And I'm Rebecca Garcia-Marguez.
In this episode, we're exploring how the rise of generative AI, specifically ChatGPT, is changing the classroom dynamic. We'll dive into how students and professors are adapting to this tool and the challenges it creates for learning, teaching, and maintaining academic integrity.
To explore some of these concerns, we'll be talking with a professor from Cal Poly Pomona's philosophy department, Dr. Lucas Strubel. We'll also be interviewing Sydney Cannon, who's a graduating senior in the psychology department at Cal Poly Pomona. They'll be sharing their perspectives on how generative AI is reshaping the classroom experience.
We'll dive into both the challenges and opportunities this new technology presents, from concerns about academic integrity to the ways it might help students' learning process.
Before we dive into our discussion, let's start with the real story that shows how AI allegations can have serious consequences. A student from the University of North Georgia, Marley Stevens, received an email that changed her academic career. She was accused of using generative AI to cheat on a paper because she used a tool like Grammarly to proofread. Despite the fact that Grammarly was listed as a recommended resource on her school's site, Marley was put on academic probation after a 6-month misconduct process.
The issue here is that the AI detection software flagged her paper as AI generated. Marley lost her scholarship because of this allegation, and her mental health took a significant hit. Her story is not unique. There's a growing number of students who've been falsely accused of using AI to cheat, and this has led to a wave of anxiety.
It's important to note that detection software like Turnitin or AI-specific tools can produce false positives. In Marley's case, the system failed to recognize that she was using a legitimate tool for writing assistance. The question now is, how can we prevent these kinds of mistakes from impacting students' futures and well-being?
To better understand the use of generative AI in classrooms and its implications, we spoke with Dr. Lucas Strubel. We asked him, in your experience, how can generative AI enhance students' learning and academic performance? Here's what he had to say.
One particularly useful thing to do would be to ask, if you're writing an argumentative essay, how might an opponent disagree with this essay? If a student's writing is awkward, ungrammatical, complex, you can feed the writing in and ask it, say, okay, how can this be simplified? What would that look like? And I know that I've had students who have found that sort of feedback useful. I think that simplified explanations can be actually quite useful if you know that that's what it is and you're going to use it appropriately.
As a faculty member at Cal Poly Pomona, how have you integrated generative AI into your teaching?
I find it useful myself in doing teaching prep. And then I think I have a sense of, okay, do I want to go to Google and verify this or not? See if I can find sources that verify stuff.
AI literacy refers to understanding the capabilities and limitations of AI to engage with algorithms effectively. How do you incorporate and promote AI literacy within your courses?
Some sort of AI literacy that should be definitely included in mini courses. When I do sort of AI literacy stuff, AI literacy units, I'll include examples of hallucinations and of them failing various reasoning tasks that you would think, how could it get this wrong? So to illustrate how different they are. As they improve, some of those examples are going to fade away.
What indicators do you use to determine if a student has used generative AI to do their assignment for them?
Sometimes students will submit a paper that's clearly been written by AI because it has fabricated citations at the end. So you read the paper, and then there's some citations at the end, and there's a Jane Doe. Literally, if Jane Doe is the author, that's not a real citation. And so then you Google it, and the article does not exist. So that's a very easy way to establish that it was used by AI. Other times, AI will use terminology that has not been taught in the class. It's technical terminology that that student very likely does not know what this means. It's certainly been, and it's not. There's no citation supporting the use of the terminology. Writing style. So how fluid is the writing? These are all clues, and they're of different sort of evidential status. So if it's a fabricated citation, like that's it. It violated academic integrity, and that's the end of the story. With fluidity of language and terminology, it's trickier.
When you suspect a student has used AI to complete an assignment, how do you approach the situation to ensure fairness and avoid false accusations?
I would probably ask a bunch of follow-up questions to see if they really understood the material. In my own conversations with students where I have suspected large language model usage, when I have suspected it, it's always been the case that it was used, and students have come clean more or less. What about the large language model papers that I'm not detecting, right? I mean, the other papers don't look like those papers. Does that mean that they aren't being used or that people are using them in more sophisticated ways? Well, I don't know. There are two real costs, right? There's the cost to the student who uses the large language model inappropriately. I think that's a genuine cost. I am not terribly excited about any sort of stringent penalty. The student's already bearing the cost. The problem is that there's students who clearly aren't using them and who write worse papers and whose grades are lower and who are going to suffer in competition for scholarships, graduate school, or post-professional programs, jobs, whatever it is, and it's not fair to them. And so the sort of burden is on the one hand, there are the students who are penalized because they are losing out on that competition, and on the other hand, there are the students who are falsely accused. And how do we balance those interests is just a difficult question. We just might be in this situation where it's not clear to me what actual effective policies are there. In some situations, prohibition doesn't work. Maybe we're in that situation. This issue is somewhat like, and an issue I've been teaching about in my kinesiology class, which is, of course, one thing of it, the use of performance-enhancing drugs in sports. They're basically incredibly hard to detect because the drugs are very effective, and it's kind of a losing battle to ban them.
What policies do you have in place regarding the use of generative AI in your courses?
In my courses, I allow students to use large language models to assist their writing. My academic integrity policy requires that students document their use of LLMs. I discussed that policy several times in class. It's on the Canvas website, and I explain the consequences for violating it. So in most cases in which I find that students violate that policy, I don't try to conclusively determine the total extent of their usage. That's very difficult to do. And complying with the policy, the documentation policy, is straightforward, and the student's chosen not to follow the policy. So I already know enough. I spell out the policy, the student hasn't followed it. That's an academic integrity violation. And that's typically sufficient for me to say to then apply penalties.
I think that it's important for instructors to understand the error modes of these AI detection software. What kinds of mistakes can they make? I tend not to trust them. If there's a high number, then that's something that I want to investigate. I don't take that as sufficient evidence.
We also spoke to Sydney Cannon, a graduating senior who will receive her bachelor's degree in psychology in spring 2025. We asked her, what are some ways students can use generative AI to help them complete assignments? And are these successful ways to use it?
That's hard because now things are different. Like, it doesn't necessarily help anymore. It's being abused. So I feel like it doesn't really help anymore. It's just a shortcut now. So honestly, with that question, I can't really answer that question because I don't think there is something that's successful about it. I don't think it's helping much.
Mm. So, can students and professors actually keep up with ChatGPT?
I think we can, but only if both sides adapt. That means updating teaching methods, but also having honest conversations about what original work even means in an AI world.
It's definitely going to take some time, transparency, and a lot of trial and error, but pretending AI doesn't exist or banning it entirely won't help anyone.
Exactly. Maybe the better question is, how do we work with AI while still protecting the learning process?
Thanks for listening to Can Students and Professors Keep Up with ChatGPT? We hope this episode gave you something to think about, whether you're a student, a professor, or just curious about how technology is reshaping education.
And a big thanks to Dr. Struble and Sydney for sharing their perspectives. See you next time.
If you care about these issues and like what you hear, please share our podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Thanks for listening.